Hello and welcome into the Blueprint Podcast. I'm David Lamb. Our guest today on the podcast, excited about this one, Betsy McAtee of Dreamland. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Good morning.
You know, we have been, me and Ted both, we've eaten a lot of ribs, so we're glad to find the secrets behind, kind of the secret sauce, and to learn about the business. What a restaurant with an incredible love, and people just have an affection for Dreamland.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, we've been around for, next year will be 60 years.
Wow, 60 years.
60 years.
And it all started with the one in Tuscaloosa?
Back in 1958
Right.
with Mr. Bishop, John Bishop. We called that, he was
Big
nicknamed
John.
Big Daddy.
Yeah,
And he was a brick mason by trade.
right.
And his knees were growing weary from being a brick mason, and he was looking for another way to provide a living for his family.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a dream, and in the dream, he felt like he had a calling to open a neighborhood cafe on the hillside beside his house.
Yeah,
So he did, and he named it Dreamland,
right.
which it's still standing today, that original location. And like a lot of neighborhood cafes,
Mm-hmm.
he sold a variety of things: hot dogs, hamburgers, candy, postage stamps, ribs. But at the end of the day, he always would sell out of ribs.
Right.
So like a true entrepreneur, he took the other things off the menu and sold just ribs, white bread,
Yeah.
soda,
And those
tea.
sodas, yeah.
Mhm.
Now, did you grow up eating at Dreamland?
I did go to the University of Alabama.
Okay.
I was never, and this is going to be shocking, I was never a rib eater
Right.
until the early 90s. When I started getting involved with the business
Mm-hmm.
and had the ribs, and was like, I have missed out on this my entire life. What was wrong with me?
Right.
What was wrong with me?
Yeah.
And now I love them. That's
Yeah.
my favorite thing on the menu.
Yeah. And how many locations now? Because I know is the latest one in Inverness? Is that
Yes,
the latest?
yes. Inverness, Highway 280.
Highway 280, yeah.
That is our 10th location.
Okay. Wow, 10 locations.
10
And
locations.
it all started with that little shop in Tuscaloosa.
On Jug Factory Road.
so-
off Jug Factory
So
Road.
what does it take to develop into the CEO of a legendary rib joint? I mean, did you grow up in the home of an entrepreneur?
Well, my father was a dentist by trade
Mhm.
and got into the restaurant business later in life.
Right.
I got my start working at Frito-Lay, which also kind of the food industry.
Right.
And I started in route sales. I mean, I started on a route delivering potato chips.
Good.
Prior to that, I worked at Parisian while I was in graduate school,
Mhm.
and that was a lot of where I learned
Right.
the people skills and dealing with customers and all that goes into that.
The restaurant business and industry, ribs, that's an incredibly competitive field because there's some great food here in the South. I mean, the field that you're in is extremely competitive. So did you kind of catch the entrepreneurial bug at an early age?
Yes, for me, because I've always sort of been in a food-based business
Mhm.
with Frito-Lay and then dealing with customers there. Just when you get bit by the restaurant bug,
Right.
it just gets in your blood.
Mhm.
And I'm very passionate about it, number one. But number two, no 2 days are alike.
Right.
And it's very fast-paced. It's very energetic. I love getting feedback from our guests that are second and third generation Dreamland guests that ate in a Dreamland location 30 years ago
Yeah.
or 20 years ago. And I just love to hear those stories.
Mhm. Is there a little, I don't know that fear or intimidation is the right, maybe it's responsibility, because you do have, Dreamland does have kind of an affectionate place in people's hearts. I mean, whenever there are memories that have been a part of going to football games at Alabama, and so it's like you're carrying on a tradition. Are you aware of that that sense of responsibility of taking over?
Oh, yes, every day, every
Really?
day,
Yeah.
every day. Well, there is a certain brand recognition that we're so blessed to have,
Mhm.
both locally,
Right.
regionally, and a little bit nationally. And I feel like we have a duty to execute every day at 100%, every
Right.
day, every shift. And I can't be there every day.
Right.
You know, we have great team members, great managers, great servers, great back of the house employees. And, our big thing is it takes teamwork to make the dream work.
Right.
And it really does. It's a team effort.
Right. And we'll get to that because it's interesting. I've got some questions about the brand because a lot of the folks who tune in are in brand development. You have an interesting brand issue, but I want to get back to how it all started. Did I read correct? Did you double major in geology, earth science, as well as economics? Is that what?
Yes. And now I'm in the barbecue
And
business.
what was the plan?
It's a great parallel, isn't it?
What was the plan when you were doing that?
Well, the plan was when I started in school, in college, like most 17, 18-year-olds, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And as I went through the process, I took some personality type profiles, and I was real good with art and science.
Okay.
And, you kind of go through the list, and I was like, oh, that seems interesting. And I'd always had an affinity for rocks and earth and that sort of stuff. And so I was going down that major, and it's a hard major. I mean, it's similar to engineering. I had a lot of engineering classes. And toward the end of getting my degree, my advisor said, well, you started off originally in the business school. And I said, yeah. And he says, well, you know what they're calling geologists in Houston these days? And I said, what? And he said, hey, waiter. And I was like, oh, really?
Oh,
so are you telling me it's going to be hard to get a job? And he's like, yeah, pretty much.
Right.
So at that point, I had enough credits where I could get a double major, and I did. I've never really worked in my field. I think the closest thing I ever came to was one time we had an issue, and there was a rock that somebody asked me to identify, but other than that, that was it. That was it.
So how do you kind of connect the dots for us in getting from the double major to how you end up at Dreamland? How did that whole come about, that transition?
Okay, well, when I left the University of Alabama, when I graduated, I took a job selling industrial chemicals.
Okay.
And I did that for about a year, long enough to know I probably wasn't well suited to sell industrial chemicals. You have to figure these things out. There's just no map.
Right.
And from there, I decided to go back to graduate school, get my MBA. And while I was doing that, I worked at Parisian.
Okay.
Parisian's no longer a brand, but it was back in the 80s. It was where a lot of people worked while going to school. I lived in Pensacola, Florida, worked at Parisian, and I'm taking these business classes, and I'm getting to put a lot of those skills in play as I'm working in the accessories department, about selling techniques and seeing the different management styles of a store manager, assistant store manager. And then when I was graduating with my MBA, I did some on-campus interviews, and one of the companies that I interviewed with was Frito-Lay.
Okay.
And I was interviewing for one of two positions in a 4-state area of a manager trainee.
Right.
And by the time my interviews took place, they had already filled the position. But they said, hey, we've got this other job. It's not the same. It'll be more route sales. Well, it wasn't more route sales. It was route sales.
Right.
And I started out as what they called an extra man or extra person. And it's where you ran vacation routes when the normal route salesperson would go on vacation.
Okay.
Now keep in mind, this is before GPS. This is before cell phones. So you had a handwritten map. And I was in the panhandle of Florida, and I didn't grow up there. So every day was an adventure. You would get on this route truck, and you had no idea where you were going other than those maps.
Right.
And I did that, and then moved up throughout the company. I became a district manager, area training manager, and then came to Birmingham in the early 1990s and called on key accounts here. And then in 2000, my dad had opened the Dreamland on Southside.
Okay.
He had opened the one in Mobile and was about to open the one in Roswell, Georgia.
Okay.
And was wanting someone to kind of help him. And I was at a point in my career where my parents had given so much to me. They'd paid for my education. My dad was getting a little bit older. And I was like, I want him to be able to enjoy life.
Right.
And I've got all this great training with a wonderful company. And I said, I'm ready to join the team. And I started out in the restaurant, and then just kind of worked my way up from there.
Yeah. Do you, oftentimes, I've got 3 kids, family things oftentimes have been the way that I've been kind of led into things. Like what's good for my family I do, what's not good I don't. It's like that's like a compass sort of. And as I look back, it's amazing to me how many of the right decisions I made and how many of the ditches I avoided just by doing what was right for my family. As you look back on that decision, then you were young and didn't have as many responsibilities, but do you see how that really was kind of you getting a hint as to where you needed to be? And because now you're flourishing,
Thank you.
In terms of deciding what to do and where to go, and kind of the wisdom of that. Do you see kind of how that life kind of helped you out there in making that decision?
Absolutely. And it was not something the decision came overnight. My dad had spoken of it several times, and the timing just wasn't right.
Right.
But at one point, I started really thinking about it. And I thought, I can make a difference, and I want to make a difference, and I want to be a part of something that is, in my opinion, a little bit legendary, very iconic. And Frito-Lay was a great teacher.
Right.
I mean, I learned so much, and the basics, and a lot about running a business that you, looking back on it, it makes sense.
Right.
At the time, I didn't understand.
It was the next step.
Right. But a lot of the positions that I had when I was at Frito-Lay were building me to run a company one day.
Yeah. And then you take over as CEO. When did you become CEO?
2010.
2010. How different is it? I've heard people say that regardless of what you do prior, as CEO, there are things you only get them on the job. That's the only way you could learn them. There are surprises.
JT.
There's no doubt, huh? Yeah.
Every day's different.
Right.
I often joke, well, we'll just write this in the manual for next time, but a lot of times it's just an event that you can't plan for, that you just have to figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is thinking on your feet, and just being also true to your core values and your company's core values, and that will guide you in the right decision making.
Yeah. We were talking about brand a minute ago. You do have the advantage that in terms of name recognition, and there's a legacy. You kind of almost have a legacy entity here in Dreamland. Does that cut both ways? Because I could see how you don't need to spend nearly as much time maybe doing it. Well, let me ask it this way. When you go to a new city, are there folks who is what is Dreamland?
Oh, absolutely. There's people in the metro Birmingham area that don't know Dreamland.
Right.
They might have heard the name, but they haven't dined with us.
Right.
So there's a large segment of the population here that haven't. But as we go into a new market, it is educating our guests on who we are and why our product is different. Because we do cook over a hickory-fired open pit. We don't use a smoker. So it's a little bit of a difference in the taste profile if someone is used to, say, spare ribs that come out of a smoker.
Yeah. But I would think at the same time there are great advantages to having the legacy and the 60 years.
60 years.
In terms of brand development, and I would bet there are some folks that are familiar with you wherever you go.
They've heard
Probably.
of the name, yes, yes. There are, everywhere we've gone, there are people that have heard of us.
Yeah.
And some of it, I mean, we've been blessed. We've been mentioned on football broadcasts with major networks. We've been in articles, newspapers. So there's been a lot of things that we've just been fortunate enough to receive. it's our responsibility when that guest comes in to dine with us to give them that best possible dining experience.
Right. In 2017, what's the greatest challenge to running a restaurant today?
For us and a lot of restaurants out there, there's so much competition from non-traditional sources
Mm-hmm.
that are competing for the dining dollar. Home meal delivery programs, in this market, lots of competitive landscape with other dining concepts. There's just a lot more competition, and it's not traditional restaurants anymore.
Right. You guys are known for ribs, but I guess, I mean, even though you're known for something like that, you still have to be developing other things, and people's taste changes and all that sort of thing. So you can't just serve ribs. So are you all trying to find more the folks that come through the door? Kind of how does that work in terms of the products you offer?
Well, for many, many, many years, we were just ribs.
Right.
And as we opened additional stores in other markets, we had to expand. We had to introduce side items and chopped pork and chicken.
Right.
And our menu has grown substantially over the last 25 years since we've opened in Birmingham. Right now, we have salads on the menu that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have. Right. So we have expanded that. And now there's something for everyone, whether you have a dietary concern of if you're a vegan or if you have gluten-free, we have options for everyone now.
You've now been CEO for 7 years, so as you look at your personal leadership and your development, how different are you as a leader now versus 7 years ago?
Lots. I think now with longevity in the position, you develop a little more maturity and don't let the big things become quite as big. You try and keep more of an even keel. It was probably a little bit more hair on fire, when I first started out. But now that I've done it a while, you just kind of have to take a deep breath and say, okay, let's figure this out, because there are always going to, no matter the industry, there will always be challenges, and you've just got to figure out what those challenges are, and then push through to figure out how the best way to solve it.
When the pressure's on, are you the kind of person to kind of grind it out through, or do you find value in sometimes stepping away, leaving the office or leaving the restaurant, just kind of getting alone? Whenever the things are getting tough, what works best for you?
I'm a
your
big
leadership style?
list maker.
Okay.
I have a list going at all times, in the car, in my back pocket, in my purse. I'm just big on lists. So when it really gets overwhelming, I have to just stop and put it all in a list. Even if it's one bullet point with 25 sub-bullet points of what needs to happen. And then once you figure out, okay, this is all that I'm dealing with, then you can start to divide and conquer.
When folks see you, they see just the successes, right? They see you open a place on 280 and customers are just flooding in. So I think oftentimes our listeners and people have this tendency just to see the good, right? So if you would tell me, since you've been CEO, what decision are you proud of? You know, that was, we did that right, we handled that right, that was a win. And is there anything that you go, you know, I'm just like everybody else, and sometimes things work and sometimes they don't, and this didn't work out? Do you have an example of both of those?
Sure. Okay. And we often joke that the streets of Birmingham are paved with our bad ideas. I mean, you know, every company has them.
They do.
Or I've often referred to it as the big black book of mistakes.
Right.
Let's just write that in. There's so many of them. There's
really?
So many of them. And you just, for us, you have to recognize this didn't work, and let's move on.
Right.
Because you can't dwell on what didn't work. You need to identify why it didn't work.
Yeah.
and just move on, because not every idea is going to be successful.
Did that come easy to you? Does that come easy to you whenever it doesn't work out? Have you ever been the person to beat yourself up about that, or how could I not see that, or are you pretty good at moving on?
I'm pretty good at moving on. I think you have to, because
Right.
if not, it'll just, I try and be positive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get so focused on the negative and why it didn't work, I mean, not everything is 100%. I mean,
Right.
if you look at any successful entrepreneur, any successful company, they all have things that didn't work. They have
Mhm.
products that didn't work or ideas that didn't work. So you've just got to move forward from that. Take the idea or the process that didn't work, identify maybe some reasons why it didn't,
Right.
and don't repeat those.
Yeah.
You don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over. If
Right.
it didn't work, just move on to the next thing.
And how important is it not to let the fear of failing limit you from trying new things and experimenting? Because I think if you let those fears kind of own you, the next great idea, the next great product, you'll miss those opportunities.
Right. There's something my kids and I would joke around and say, don't let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game.
Right.
There's going to be successes and failures in everything, and if you don't try, you don't know. It could be the greatest thing ever.
Mhm.
And a lot of great ideas are born out of problems that somebody has had or issues that somebody has had, and they've identified it
Right.
to move on.
Yeah.
So I think in all companies you have that, and
Mhm.
we're certainly
Okay.
no exception
Yeah.
to that.
Now, are you part of EO Birmingham?
I'm part of EO Birmingham.
Okay.
Yes.
How did you come about the decision to be a part of that group, and what has been a part of EO Birmingham, and kind of that? For those that don't know, it's a business kind of accountability group.
Yes, it's Entrepreneurs Organization.
Okay.
And it's a global organization that is comprised of entrepreneurs. And there's certain, membership status that you have, certain goals you have to meet to become a
Right.
member. But essentially, it's people that are entrepreneurs. And the whole goal of Entrepreneur Organization, or EO as we call it, is to promote entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And, we have core values
Right.
for our organization.
Yeah.
Boldly Go, Make a Mark are two of my favorites.
So for you, what was the impetus to join up and get involved with that group?
When you are the CEO of your company, or the highest ranking member of
Mhm.
your company, sometimes you just need to run an idea by somebody.
Right.
And in EO, it creates an environment where you can do that.
Mhm.
We meet once a month, and everything we talk about is confidential, and it's idea sharing, it's advice
Right.
sharing, and it's like-minded entrepreneurs that are wanting a peer-to-peer organization.
There's an adage. I wonder if you think this is true or not. It's lonely at the top. Is there some truth to that?
There's some truth to that. There's some
Right.
truth to that. Sometimes you have an idea, whether it be a product or a service or a personnel decision, that you just want to run by someone that is in your same position in another company or another industry.
Right. Are you comfortable with the reaching out and the networking and that aspect of what you do?
I love it.
Do you
I love
really?
it. And because of my involvement with EO, I have been able to travel the world. I've seen some incredible speakers. The amount of learning that I have received, that I have then taken back and put into place at Dreamland, I can't put a value on it.
Are you, as I researched you, I noticed that there seemed to be oftentimes where you were the only female at the table,
Mhm.
almost. Are you comfortable in that role? Did that take some getting used to?
Well, it's pretty much always been that way. When I started my career out, there weren't many females selling industrial chemicals.
Right.
there weren't many females in the field sales at Frito-Lay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm used to it. I don't look at it any differently. I like to think of it as I offer a different perspective when I'm with a group and it's primarily men. I do offer a different perspective
Right.
in the way I look at things.
What kind of advice? I'm certain young entrepreneurial women find their way to you because you're visible. You're with a visible brand. What kind of advice do you find yourself giving to entrepreneurial young women or women wanting to make their mark in business?
I would give the same advice to a female as I would a male, and it's find what you're passionate about and get in there. And it may not be your dream job, but you will learn something from every job you have, and use that as a stepping stone of learning, so that as you go to the next level, you've got that basics of understanding.
Mm-hmm. There's a phrase that is you hear now in business is kind of trendy, and it's trying to understand entrepreneurs and what's their superpower. You know, what did Steve Jobs? What was his what was he great at? Where was he genius? You know, where was he? You know, what was his really part of his identity? For you, I'll ask that question to you. What is it that you bring to the table as CEO and as an entrepreneur and as a leader? What comes easiest to you? And if you have a superpower, what would you think? What would you say it would be?
What comes easiest for me is the passion I have for the business.
Right.
And I'm told quite frequently, your passion is what drives you. I'm very passionate about it. I'm passionate about our industry. I'm passionate about the guest experience, because we've all been shaped by some type of guest experience, whether it's a dining experience or a retail experience. We've all been shaped by that, and that's what I'm passionate about. And if you have a team, if you're not passionate about it, then it's hard for your team to get passionate about it as well.
Are you a competitive person?
Yes.
Are you? Everybody that's been on this podcast is quite competitive, so that kind of fuels you as well?
Oh, yes, yes.
Do you think, is it, because this is kind of interesting to me, I wonder sometimes if it's a competition, someone across the street, down the road, or in the industry, or is the competition greater kind of on the inside, knowing what you're capable of and how big your dreams are? Does the internal competitiveness drive you just as much as that against somebody else?
For me, it's the internal.
Yeah.
It's I have high standards, and I want to meet the standards for myself and for those around me, because I feel like if you're giving it 110% every day, and no matter what you do, whether it's a ball game or an art project or work, just give it your best. Give it 110% in anything you do.
Right. Final question from me. You're in a very competitive business, the one that you're in. It is
Right.
super competitive.
Super competitive.
Well, what makes it all worth it to you?
For me, it's the stories. It's having that interaction with that guest and their experience. When someone comes to dine in any restaurant, but the way we look at it, if someone comes to dine with us, we want them to put the cares of the world aside, even if it's just for 30 minutes or an hour. We want to deliver that experience so that, if you've had a bad day or gotten some bad news, we want you to come and just be able to enjoy your time and your meal with us. So it's all about that experience.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Great to meet you, and thanks for the great work Dreamland does.